Is called to order. Please rise for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag.
Mrs. Mahalis, Mrs. Schneider, Mrs. Click, Mr. Acom,
Here.
Mr. Sobolski.
Tonight with special reports and recognitions. Tonight we are recognizing two students from Vernon Middle School as Rotary Students of the Month. They are Lily Spiak and Colton Logan. So we have a motion. Mr. Dawson, please call the roll.
Mrs. Schneider,
Yes.
Mr. Sobolski, Mrs. Mahalis, Mr. Acom, Mrs. Click.
Lily and Colton, please come up.
Thank you, Ms. Mahalis, Board of Education. Every month, high school and myself in the middle school put students in front of you guys that are just great faces of Aurora City Schools. Again, we're doing it this week. These two individuals, when they leave Harmon this year, and I've been here a long time, and I've seen many kids come and go. We're going to definitely, these two individuals are going to feel the impact because the amount of things that they do around the school, their faces constantly being seen, helping others, it's awesome. And yes, we're going to have other students come up from 7th grade, but it's going to be a huge task to replace these two individuals. I'm really honored to have these two, always looking to help out others. They never get mad at anybody, but they might get mad at me here when I say that, Colton Logan, last month, 2 months ago, we had the Harmon Middle School Student of the Month. Colton, on his own with his family, says, hey, can I come up and support them? They come up to the Rotary meeting. He's there before 7 o'clock in the morning to support the Harmon Middle School student that was there at that time. I'm like, who does that for that meeting? I've never have seen that in all my years, but that's just a perfect example of who Colton is. And Lily Spiak, on Fridays, everyone's booking to get out of here, go home. Here's Lily going through, trudging, collecting, doing the recycling. And then always, with our games that start later this year because of busing and our sports, Lily's always there running the concession stands, organizing it all and doing it. It's like, that's just incredible. And always, both of them, loving every second of it. And so it's just so nice to see, yes, grades and athletic, and participate in clubs and bands and, in music programs, but the amount of things that they do every day with that positivity is just outstanding. So you're going to hear from two outstanding individuals, and first we'll start off with Lily Spiak.
Hi, I'm Lily Spiak, and I'm an 8th grader at Harmon Middle School. To start off, I would like to thank the staff, board, and Rotary Club for the opportunity to be here. There are many aspects of my life that have helped me become who I am today, and I'm excited to share a little bit about myself. An important part of my life is the support I receive at home. My family is composed of a younger brother and sister, my mom and dad, and my dog Charlie. Both of my siblings have supported me by coming to different events, concerts, and ceremonies that I've been a part of. My parents have also been such an important part of my success at school, home, and everywhere else. They've been with me during the easy parts and have pushed me during the harder parts of my life. My whole family has supported me throughout everything, including my accomplishments, both academic and personal. I'm so fortunate to have such remarkable support and encouragement at home. The other significant part of my life is at school. Not only do I enjoy the time I spend at Harmon, but I also enjoy learning and the staff that makes it all worthwhile. I have fantastic teachers who challenge me when needed and who support me when I struggle. I am so lucky to be part of a school district that has teachers who give it their all towards their students and who make a positive impact on us. My two favorite subjects are math and English. I love English because I feel very passionate about reading, writing, and the work I put into it. I would also like to acknowledge Mr. Montello, who is my teacher for English. He's encouraged me to put my best foot forward in my writing and who challenges me when I need it. I enjoy talking to him about the book I'm currently reading and the writing I do in and out of class. He has made an impact that very few teachers have ever made on me, and for that I could be one of the most grateful people in this room. The other subject that I mentioned was math. I love finding a solution to the problem and the work it took to get there. But I didn't only love math for the numbers this year. I loved it because of the person who taught it to me. While Mr. Brancasio may be tough, he's one of the most unique people I've ever met. He's a fantastic teacher who always finds a way to challenge everyone, and I believe that he's made a substantial impact on me specifically. He makes math important, fun, and I'm so lucky to have him this year. While at school, I try to be involved with clubs and extracurricular activities. I've participated in reading, writing, and speech and debate clubs. I'm also part of Harmon's outstanding orchestra program, and I play the violin. I also have had the honor of being part of Beta Club this year. In Beta, I'm doing the opening speech for the induction ceremony for the new Beta students. I'm in the recycling program. I sold food at the basketball games, and I'm the founder of the Teacher Help program. The Teacher Help program is when a teacher needs help with setting up tomorrow's lesson or organizing their classroom, and Beta members can sign up and help out the teacher. So far, I've been part of every project, and I'm glad for the success the program has brought. Outside of school, I enjoy reading, walking my dog Charlie, being with my family, babysitting, and volunteering. In the past, I've volunteered by raking leaves with the Rotary Club, sorting food for the food bank, Safety Town, and helping teachers on my own time. Being with my family is something I value very highly. My family and I love to go on different family adventures such as walks, parks, different museums, and other fun experiences. We also take family trips to different places such as Michigan, North Carolina, New York, Kalahari, and Disney World. These experiences have been so much fun, and I appreciate the amazing places I'm lucky enough to have seen. I'm only an 8th grader, but I'm so privileged to be part of this amazing community. I can't wait to see the possibilities I get to do up at the high school next year and the lives I get to make a difference in. This was an honor that I'm extremely grateful for, and I would just like to thank everyone again for this extraordinary opportunity. Thank you.
Great job, Lily. And now, Colton Logan.
One month ago, I was watching my friend Joe Grittis give his speech at the Rotary Club meeting for winning the same prestigious award that I am now accepting. Watching him give a speech was an inspiration to me to be a better student, teammate, friend, son, brother, and person in general. My name is Colton Logan, and I am an 8th grader at Harmon Middle School. To begin, I want to thank the board and the Rotary Club, as the work these groups do inspires me and many others like me. I'd also like to thank the Harmon staff for choosing me for this award and helping me through the 3 years I've been at Harmon Middle School. I'd like to thank my family. I thank my mom for pushing me to try my best in whatever I do, and she is always there for when I need her. She works at Layton and always makes sure her students are succeeding, which inspires me to help make sure the people around me are succeeding as well. I thank my dad for inspiring me to help everyone around me before I help myself. He has also taught me so many lifelong lessons that I still use today. He was also the one to introduce me to the many things I love to do today, such as playing and watching sports. I thank my sister, Eva. She has shown me that hard work beats talent every single time, as in both school and sports. She has worked harder than anyone I know to get to where she is. My family has been an inspiration to me to try to be a better person because of the actions and things they do to help others. When I was 8 years old, I decided to try out for the Roar Athletics, a travel baseball team. When I barely made the team, I struggled. For the whole 8U season, I didn't hit a single ball out of the infield. In the next season, I didn't do much better, only getting one hit into the outfield. After these 2 seasons, I knew I wanted to get better. So I trained during the offseason with the hitting coach and improved. Not by a lot, but improved. Over the past few years, I've gotten better at hitting, pitching, and the game of baseball in general. I've learned that being talented doesn't mean everything. The thing that matters is how much time you put into the things you do and how dedicated you are to getting better. Although I love sports, I also take pride in my academics. Ever since I learned what math was, I've been obsessed with it. When I was in 2nd grade, I used to brag to people that I knew what 50 times 50 was. In 3rd grade, when we were learning how to round, I was so excited to tell everyone that I already knew how to do that. Learning math has been something I've enjoyed for the past 8 years of my life. There are concepts in math that I don't fully understand, so I make sure I spend time practicing and learning so I can improve. My favorite type of math to do is definitely algebra. Solving problems with using different means is something I love doing. Although most math concepts come to me with ease, I recognize that many students struggle with math and need help. Whenever I can help someone, in math class or anywhere else, I try to help them to the best of my ability. Helping others is something I love to do. As a member of Beta Club, I tried to impact my school and community in a positive way. Whether that is picking up trash on the side of the road, working at my church, helping homeless shelters, or even just helping at a Harmon. Doing these acts of service have impacted myself and others in wonderful ways. When picking up trash, although it is not the most enjoyable thing to do, I know it is helping both the community and the environment. At my church, I love helping out kids. Some of these kids I'm still in contact with today, and they always talk to me as I made a positive impact on them by just being a good person. When Beta Club did the Socktober event at Harmon, I helped by making signs and delivering the socks to the homeless shelter. At the homeless shelter, the people there were so grateful for the socks, and it made me realize how lucky I am to have a home and what I would consider basic things such as socks. Helping others always brings a smile to my face, because I know, even though it may have been a small act of kindness, it means a lot to the people I've helped. This award means a lot to me. I try my best to help others and be the best me I can be. I'm so grateful that I'm being recognized for doing what I love. Once again, I want to thank the board, the Rotary Club, the Harmon staff, and my family. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your night. Thank you.
All right, now we'll move on to hearing of the public on agenda and non-agenda items. This period of the board meeting is allocated to hearing public comments on both agenda and non-agenda items. The board and administration do not respond at board meetings, but we will follow up. Someone from the table will follow up at the meeting. Individuals wishing to comment should have registered on the sheet at the back of the room. Each speaker is limited to a total time of 3 minutes. The board chair will keep the time, and each person addressing the board is requested to provide his or her name and address upon being recognized. And that information will be included in the minutes. So first we have Drew Lewis. Please come up to the podium here. Yes.
Hi, my name is Drew Lewis, and I live at 600 Aurora East Homestead. I'm an 8th grader at Harmon Middle School, and I'm here to talk to you this evening about the importance of having lacrosse as a high school sport. My brother and I started lacrosse 2 years ago at a summer camp that the youth program hosted here in Aurora. And over the years, the program has worked together to get more and more kids to try out the sport for the first time. At the camp, when I tried out, I fell in love with the sport. It's a great way to form better relationships with my friends and other people that I never knew in the grade below me. This sport has taught me a new level of mental and physical toughness and many life lessons. I've been through ups and downs with my teammates, but we always get through it. We have to be a team and work together to win games. This is an opportunity for physical activity with my friends. I just stopped baseball for lacrosse because of how much I love the sport, and I would appreciate you making sure that lacrosse can be a sport for me and my friends and the kids to come after me in high school. Thank you for listening.
Next we have Megan Jansen.
I'm Megan Janzig. I live at 851 Nautilus Trail. I'm actually speaking on behalf of my two sons who are on the high school boys club lacrosse team this evening. They could not be here. They're practicing out in the snow or maybe in the gym. So what I asked them to do was to write down some things now that they're in full swing. And first I'm going to speak for my oldest son, Joe. He is a junior in high school this year. And he wanted to thank the board for your major contribution, both financially and your support. and also for your approval of coaches Kozar and Adams. They're building something special. Joe also wanted to share that it would be the best next logical step for lacrosse to be a varsity sport and be a team and have a complete schedule with home games. He also said, we are committed every day, just like a varsity team, whether it's 7 to 9 p.m. practices or most nights 9 to 11 p.m. He also wanted to share that he's waited 2 years to play this sport at the high school level. He feels it's important for the same kids in his grade to go out with a letter next season. He's also wanted to say that he could not be happier to take the next step with his current members of his team. My other son, Johnny, is not as poetic as Drew or Joe. He's just a little more raw. And he wanted to share that we've asked for a club sport for the last 2 years, and we felt denied. I would hate to feel denied a varsity status because of another new rule. He also said, our one coach does the work of 3 to 4 coaches at a fraction of the pay. He ended on a more positive note. Said, I love this team. We have already built and embraced being a hardworking brotherhood of players. The thought of facing the unknown fate of being left to know if we're club or varsity is more bearable, knowing that I have these boys, that we have each other's backs. But it is tough to think about. And then myself as a mom and a taxpayer and a lacrosse advocate, I'd like to thank the board as well for your contributions. And we invite you guys to attend a practice. I think that if you were to watch them practice, if you were to watch them play a game, it's so much more than a club. It is an athletic sport. It is a varsity sport. It is blood, sweat, and tears. My sons have 3 varsity letters between the 2 of them, and they have assured me that the work that they're putting in this year is at least that or maybe even more than what they do in their current sports. So thank you so much for your time.
Next is Monica Hayden.
All right, my name is Monica Hayjuk. I live at 193 Trails End. I have 2 boys in the school system here. I'm not a public speaker, so I'm just going to read my text message that I wrote to myself today so I can talk to you guys. So my boys have luckily had the opportunity to play lacrosse originally in Solon and lacrosse over 6 years ago before the youth club lacrosse program here was started in Aurora. And we are so happy to finally be able to play in our own city. The lacrosse community is rapidly growing, and our club team is awesome for our young kids, but it would be nice if the kids have a high school program to move into that is supported by the athletic department, the school, the board as a varsity sport. Because this is a fast-paced and high-endurance sport, this is also a perfect sport to have added to the spring to keep the kids conditioned and active for fall sports like football and soccer. It keeps them busy, it keeps them out of trouble, provides a friend group, a belonging, and it also gives kids another alternative to sports in the spring. Tonight's discussion, based on what you guys are discussing with the club to varsity, should exclude lacrosse under the new policy we're discussing for club to varsity sports, as lacrosse has already been established within the last 2 years as an intramural and club team at the high school and should be grandfathered in under the current policy, which is that the board can approve making a varsity sport with no minimum amount of years. I have reached out multiple times to the board, athletic department, and schools about this, but about lacrosse in the past because I'm very passionate about it. My kids love it. It's a fun sport. It's great for the kids. So I appreciate your time tonight, and I hope the members of the school board consider moving the sport along for future as a varsity sport for all the kids who have invested their time and money into this new sport for Aurora. Thank you.
Hi everybody, I'm Megan Race, 320 Aspen Court. I am co-founder of Aurora Youth Lacrosse with my husband Sean, And we began in 2021 after having to play lacrosse in other cities and moving a son all around and feeling lost. So we wanted to give him something where he could feel as a part of something as he could, being new in the area. And our intention with the sport, I'm going to be completely honest, was to build it so that it was a feeder system for the high school. That was our goal. We were so excited about it, but we also knew that we had to take it on as a business venture. So we focused our efforts there in order to make sure that all the kids in the community have access to learning the sport lacrosse. And we started a camp in the summer, which was a goof-off camp and so much fun, right? We did that because we wanted kids to see that it could be a lot of fun to learn something new. So we are happy to take any and all inquiries for lacrosse and what we've been doing, what's going on. All communications, if they could please go to aurorayouthlacrosse@gmail.com. Both my husband and I are very involved. We are everywhere all the time, and so focusing any communications through that email address would be very helpful. We are still rostering kids at this very moment, and I am here freaking out because I have to order uniforms. So my role with the club is primarily the marketing, promotions, all the administrative work. Sean's role is all the scheduling, all the referees, all the tournaments. Together, along with our other side hustles and volunteering and full-time jobs, bear with us. We will get you any and all information that you need. Just please request it through that address. We are so excited about the opportunity about having lacrosse at the high school, and I just want to say thank you. From a parent's perspective, I'm going to switch hats real quick. My son did not want to play lacrosse after we started this club, which that was kind of the reason why we started it. So knowing that was kind of a dagger to the heart, but we knew it was important to this community, so we continued to run this club for that reason, and we knew that to build that feeder system for the high school, it needed to be there. So, and we knew we made these amazing connections with these kids. These kids are so excited about this sport. We couldn't walk away from it. So now, hearing that this coming to the high school and letting my son make his own decisions, he recently came to us and is possibly interested in playing again, which is great, but if it's not going to be here for another 3 or 4 years, we're going to lose multiple kids to different schools continually. And I know we already have. So we have other organizations. Okay. Thank you. I appreciate your time so much. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Does that sound good? I think so. Should be good. Almost as quick. I'm just going to get it now so it loads up, right? Ah. Okay. I can also drive if you want me to. I don't know.
Dim it or something. Let me see. Well, I can't. Oh, that's better. Yeah. It's rough to see.
Think so? Think so. Mike, you set?
It's not on.
Yeah, I'm set. Okay. I am, yes. Yeah, so,
Mrs. Mahalis, we have the minute, approve the minutes. Mrs. Click? Mrs. Schneider? Mr. Cebulski? Mrs. Mahalis? Mr. Aiken?
all right. Well, I'm excited to introduce Mr. Maglianico because we recently had our special education profile posted, as you can see up there. Mike's going to be kind of walking us through that, so you get a chance to kind of see what it is that it shows and demonstrates. But I will tell you that I can say that the number of families who have moved to Aurora because they've talked to other families who have been supported when their young people come through the district who have special needs and things like that is just amazing. And it's because of what Mike has done with the program, as well as the staff and under Mike's leadership. So he'll give you a sample of some of the things that our special education profile kind of shows in relation to that. So Mr. Maglianico, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Roberto, and thank you to the Board of Education for allowing me to speak tonight about Aurora's special education profile. We received this from the state of Ohio, and really what it does is it makes a determination of how we are doing as a school district in meeting the needs of our students with special needs. We were assessed on 11 different indicators that target 6 different essential questions. Those are built into the special education profile. This is actually our live link to the profile through the Department of Education. I thought instead of putting it into a PowerPoint, we could walk through the profile together, and I could show you some of the data that's presented within the profile. I had expected to be over there where Paul is, so I feel a little awkward, so bear with me. So this is what the profile looks like. The first essential question is, are young children with disabilities entering kindergarten ready to learn? It looks at indicator 12, which targets the number of students who come to us from Help Me Grow or early intervention for preschool services. And this indicator looks to make sure that we have IEPs in place by this child's 3rd birthday if they are coming to us for preschool. So you will see for the 2022-23 school year, we had 14 students come through Help Me Grow, and we had 14 IEPs in place by the 3rd birthday. So those are all of the students that come to us from early intervention for preschool. We also receive students from preschool from parents who may make referrals or requests for evaluations, for preschool evaluations. The next essential question is, are children with disabilities achieving at high levels? So this looks at 2 different indicators. It looks at the number of students who are participating in the alternative assessment for students with severe cognitive disabilities in the areas of reading and language arts. The target is to be less than 1% of the total number of students assessed in our district. We're at 0.86%, and then for math, we were at 0.88%. So what this tells us is that in our district, we have high expectations for our students with disabilities because they are participating in most of them are participating in the state assessments that they're typically developing peers are participating in. Our participation rate for students with disabilities on the alternative assessment, we've actually met this indicator the last 2 years. It's something that we've been working on through different evaluation procedures to make sure that we are identifying the correct students to participate in the alternative assessment. So it's something that we continue to work on and hope to maintain that level of being under the 1% cap. Essential question number 3 is, to what extent do students with disabilities have access to the general education environment? You will see that there are no indicators under this question. What I will tell you, though, at Aurora City Schools and within the Aurora community, we have a high belief that all kids need to be in the general education classroom. That's where they receive a high quality instruction from our gen ed teachers, and that's where we believe that they gain the most. So all of our students within the district are provided opportunities to access the general education classroom, and then they are supported through special education services so that they can access those environments. Essential question number 4, are youth with disabilities prepared for life, work, and post-secondary education? This is a big area. We had 4 indicators that were targeted in this area. The first one is indicator number 1, which is the graduation rate. And this looks at the number of students that left Aurora High School, the number of students with disabilities that left Aurora High School, meeting the same requirements as students without disabilities or graduating from high school. We're at 90% last year, which is a huge accomplishment. You'll see over the last 3 years, we've increased gradually, and maybe someday we'll be at 100% graduation rate for our students with disabilities. Indicator 2 looks at the dropout rate for students with disabilities. The target is to be under 15.5%. We are at 3%. We had 1 student with a disability who left Aurora High School without a diploma last year. Indicator 13 looks at secondary transition services. So for our students who are 16 years or older on an IEP, there's a requirement that we have transition plans in place within the IEP. Last year we had 83 students who required a transition plan, and of those 83 students, all the IEPs had transition plans in place that met the state requirements or exceeded the state requirements. Those transition plans set goals for students for post-secondary education, employment, and or independent living skills. Indicator 14 is the post outcomes, and what this looks at is whether or not we send surveys out to students with disabilities who had graduated from Aurora High School. We do send these surveys out. The purpose of the survey is to determine what are the students doing after graduation. Are they participating in higher education, maybe ongoing training for work, and or are they competitively employed? We send those surveys out in January, February. Wait for the results to come back. A lot of times we don't get the results. So right about this time of the year, we start making phone calls to those students so that we can gain that information and it can be reported to the state. So we did meet that indicator. Essential question number 5, does the district implement IDEA to improve services and results for students with disabilities? There are 2 indicators that we are assessed on. The first one is child find, and that looks at our initial evaluations in the district and whether or not we've completed those initial evaluations within 60 days of receiving parental consent. So this data is kind of interesting to look at, especially since 2018. You will see the drop in 2019, and then in 2021, we increased to 53 initial evaluations, 55 this past school year. I attribute that to parents moving into our district, as well as ramifications from COVID. I'm hoping that the initial evaluations will start to decrease with this year and the years progressing, and that we have students in our buildings, and that we have a robust MTSS system, K-12, that we're able to provide interventions to students so that we may not have to continue to identify students with disabilities. So it's kind of interesting to look at that data, how you see the drop, and then high numbers of initial evaluations. But we did meet that indicator. Indicator 15 is timely correction of noncompliance. This was easy to meet because we were not out of compliance in any areas in special education last year. If we are out of compliance, we work closely with the state support team to make sure that we are fixing those issues and addressing the issues. And then the last essential question is, are children receiving equitable services and supports across their district? So this sets a risk ratio of 2.5 in, for subgroups in our identification rate for students with disabilities. So it's kind of interesting to look at our data and the different racial groups or subgroups and the identification. So we met being under that risk ratio for our students who are Black, Hispanic, multiracial, and white. What this data does show us is that we are increasingly getting close to the threshold or the risk threshold for our students who are Black in our identification process. And we're at a 2.26. This is something that we need to keep an eye on as a school district to make sure that we are appropriately identifying our students. As you dig deeper into this data, it really is our identification under the specific learning category in this subgroup that is high at this point. So our school psychologists, our special educational teams are going to keep a close eye on that to make sure that we're doing the right things for students. So those are the 11 indicators in the profile. We met every indicator, which is a huge accomplishment as a school district. And you know, I kind of wrote this so I'd remember what to say, but the profile solidifies the amazing programming that we do here at Aurora. It's a team effort. It's the collaboration of our administrators, general education teachers, our intervention specialists, our support staff or related support staff, and our paraeducators that provide this great education to our students. So I'm proud to be part of their team. I'm proud of the work that we do here. And I'd like to thank you as a board, as well as Mr. Roberto and Dr. Misitich for their ongoing support of our program. So thank you. Thank you. Paul, are you able to go back from there? Or do you need me to?
Could you put it on the slideshow for us? Were there any questions for Mr. Maglianico before we hopped over? I don't know. Okay, so you want me to go? Okay. Look like you're about to say something. Okay. So tonight we're sort of taking you on a journey through the entire spectrum of our continuum of services. We start out with the special education profile and Mr. Maglianico, and then we roll on over to my report with Mrs. Shannon Gagel, who's our gifted coordinator, to sort of talk about the other end of that spectrum, obviously from some of our most fragile learners, then now to our gifted policy and some of our most accelerated learners, which obviously we're proud of, like I said, the entire spectrum of services we offer our students and families here. So I want to try to be as brief as possible and give Shannon more time to talk about our district services plan. And tonight is a little bit unique. Obviously, what you have, and I explained this to you in the report, you have as a discussion item the gifted policy. And there's, as you can see, there's not really much in the way of substantive changes. Not necessary, really, it's just updating the language of ODE to do. However, because of shifting landscape with guidance with gifted policy, and as you've been hearing me talk about almost every month, shifting guidance with everything recently, but just tonight's feature is the gifted policy. Mrs. Gagel has been very proactive, working with Lindsay Van Vossen, who's also a gifted educator, myself, Mr. Maglianico. We both work with Shannon on gifted services. So we were prepared to make some changes in practices. And so that's why we brought the other documents for you tonight, and that would be added as a regulation, which is not something we always do, but obviously the policy sort of being big picture, sort of umbrella, which is good. I mean, we need to have that. Obviously, that's part of the board's role is to create those. But the regulation, we feel like it is really helpful in sort of fleshing out what that really is and what our services are. So as you can see up on the screen, it's really just the details of the screening and process. You get a little bit more information in that regulation, including, some of the specific tests, the COGAT, the Iowa, more on some of our newer categories like the creative category, for example. And then obviously, as you look at the regulation, you'll see that it's really more of a user-friendly document in terms of the language, so it's something we can use with educators, with parents, so it will actually be shared and utilized versus the policy, which is good, but we think this is more helpful. I don't want to say too much about this, but you can see in your packet. Obviously, it's nicely laid out. You've got all the different headings, the different areas. I mentioned the referral process, some of the specifics, transfer in, the appeal process, and then obviously more on the WEPS, the written education plan, which Shannon will talk about a little bit more during her portion. So the other thing that I wanted to highlight, and after this I am going to step out of the way for Shannon to talk about the service plan. So what's nice about the service plan, I think, in that addition, is that obviously it highlights all the different services and the personnel and what that looks like at the different grade bands. You can look at what we do at the elementary, you can look at what we do at Harmon up through the high school. And then obviously it fleshes out more about the written education plan, sort of that formal process to document goals and progress in those goals for our gifted students. So I'm going to stop there, and Shannon, have you come up and talk a little bit about those different categories in the service plan. And thank you for coming tonight and joining us.
I'm a little shorter. Good evening. I just wanted to start by saying that the Ohio Department of Education and Workforce defines gifted as one who performs or shows potential for performing at remarkably high levels of accomplishment when compared to their age, experience, or environment. And I think of that and I think about potential. And this particular district has no mandate to serve, yet we only have to identify our students. Yet instead we do a really good job with a lot of very well-educated men and women to meet the needs of our highest ability learners, so that potential isn't lost. And that's our biggest thing, is that a child is gifted and they're gifted all day long. So it is not something where they go to a gifted class and that's their service. We're hoping to broaden that service so that they're all day getting something and having that same learning opportunity that their typical ability peers and even those that meet special education needs as well. And I will say that many of the friends that Mr. Maglianico has in his caseload, I share as well, because Twice Exceptional is one of the ways that we do serve, that there are kids that are both gifted and have needs that are served on IEPs. So our spectrum is broad and a lot of our kids can go anywhere. So again, back to our kids are gifted all day, every day. And the biggest way that we serve our kids is through cluster classroom placement. When we do that, the teachers of record are their classroom teachers. They know who they are. We have so many of our teaching staff that either have their master's in gifted or they've done the gifted certification. And if they haven't done that, they've at least done what we call our gifted professional development, where we do high quality professional development through the district to help our teachers to understand what our gifted learners truly need each day. So all day, every day is how they're being served by their classroom teachers. In addition to that, gifted interventionists, Lindsay Van Fossen, myself, and Karen Sunderhaft, and Dr. Sobolewski at the middle school, we're all working to meet their needs on a more specific basis. You know, some of us are more math-oriented, some are more language arts-oriented, but we're trying to meet their needs along with partnering with their classroom teachers. As you can see on the service plan, that we are meeting everybody's needs first through that classroom placement, and then the specific, where are their specific needs. And sometimes it is with us, and sometimes a parent or a student may say, this particular placement isn't what I need at the moment. And so we do even have in our service plan how a parent might opt out of services if it's not meeting what their child needs. The other thing I wanted to point out is that under the service it shows that the classroom teacher is always getting support from the gifted coordinator or gifted intervention specialist. And that's because it doesn't even matter if they have a gifted cluster classroom. It may be a classroom where we have a move-in student who the parents have not requested testing at this time, but the teacher knows that this child may have a gift. So referring for gifted testing, and also saying, I just need something more than what I've got right now. How can you help me to find the curriculum or the supports that will help to meet this child's needs? And that's where we work as a team. So that work with the GIS and the classroom teachers is important to see together. As Dr. Milsitich said, we also have had to expand some of our offerings in the past 8 years, where we had to start finding ways to serve our students who are creative thinking gifted. And so at the middle school, we expanded that through the Explore period, where our creative thinking gifted students have that time with 3 different teachers, kind of to hone in on their creativity and to give them a place to expand. And then lastly, over the last 8 years that this has been going on, 7 years, because the last update was in 2017 that Heather Keenan had done. And so a lot of things have changed since then. And one of the things is that our students, their parents, and teachers have become much more adept at referring their students for testing, especially on off-grade levels. So we have expanded the number of tests that we've had and the number of times where a parent or a student has requested acceleration. So all of those things have had to, figure out how do we serve these children where they just don't match with what we're doing at that particular grade level. So acceleration from our early entrance kids down at the 4-year-old level all the way up to grade skipping throughout the high school, where they may skip a specific math to get to other math areas. So there is a broad spectrum of how we serve our students each year in giftedness, and that's because they're a broad spectrum of people themselves. So it's not a one-size-fits-all, and what one student might get is very different than another, and we hope that that helps to meet their needs and to keep growing and making this a better program year by year. Do you have any questions that I can answer? Oh, I guess I did forget to touch on one point about the written education plans. Did you have a slide on that? Written education plans, they are required by our state. Really what they are is a communication device. It's not an IEP where it's a legal document where we're held to that legal standard. But it is a communication device between the school district and the parents. And so parents get this each year so that they understand how their child is identified, the way that they're served, who's actually serving them, and what the goals that those teachers have for those students to grow each year. So that is done every single year. Our classroom teachers, especially at the elementary level, have a broad base of how they change those goals based on a specific student and their behavioral or social and emotional needs, versus at the middle and high school, where as they get more specific into their math and their language arts work, those teachers have specific goals for those students as they continue to move toward the next level. So that's how our written education plans work for our parents. Any questions that I can answer? It is. I cannot tell you exactly what year the state of Ohio said that we must now identify in that area as well, but we identify those students based on a two-pronged assessment. First, they have to meet a 112 or above, which is pretty much a one standard deviation above the mean for their actual ability test. So on a COGAT, about a 115, but they bump it down to a 112, standard error of measurement. And then if you've met that requirement, then the classroom teacher, who has known that student for quite a while, will look at them as on a 9-point scale to try to determine what are they a different thinker. And so once they've determined that they're a different thinker in the way that they kind of interact with the world, or the way that they may have just a really vivid imagination, and it comes across in the way that they learn and the way that they expound on that learning. So we do that through the cluster classroom placement. Their classroom teachers understand that they've been identified as gifted in that particular area, and they're trying to kind of push them to think more creatively instead of to just kind of think, oh, here's 3 good ideas. No, I want to see 3 good ideas. Now let's see 2 more that you've taken from those 3 good ideas. And then as they get to the middle school, Mrs. Jacobson, Mrs. Matusik, and Mr. Riley use that explore period to truly say, hey, sky's the limit. You have, everybody here can think as creatively as you want, but let's see where you can go that you didn't think you could do. And each year we've been working on how do we take our learning, and this year we're working on a book study called A Meaningful Mess, and try to make it a little messier and a little bit more student-centered so that they can take that creative bit inside of them and kind of give to the world something completely different. Sure. Any other questions that I can answer? Great. Thank you for your time.
Yes.
Thank you, Mrs. Mahalis. This evening I have 3 different resolutions for your consideration, and I'll start with the financial report for February. And in February, our revenues exceeded expenditures by about $4.5 million as we are starting to get our tax advances in. This increases the general fund cash balance to about $12.7 million, 8 months into the fiscal year. Revenues were about a little over 15% less than projected, and expenditures about 3% greater. As I mentioned just a little bit earlier, on the revenue side, we received 4 tax advances from Portage County, totaling a little over $7.5 million. This was about $1.4 million less than what we had projected, but again, this is a measure of when the taxes are collected. And this year, I believe a lot of the localities were maybe a little later in getting their tax bills out because of possible changes that were talked about in Columbus, which in the end didn't come about. If you look at last year, at the same time, we received about $9.8 million in advances, and the year before that, a little over $10 million. So in the end, it's nothing overly to be concerned about, as our final collection settlement in March will just be greater than what we had projected, and it should kind of put us pretty close to where we anticipate that we should be. Expenditure side, there's nothing really, everything's running pretty close to projection, all within normal variances. So thus far for the fiscal year, revenues are about $1.4 million less than projected. Again, that's about right where we were with on these tax advances. Expenditures are $2,700 less than projected, so we're pretty much right on projection as far as what our expenditures are. So right now, we have an unfavorable variance of $1.4 million. But next month, then that's going to change significantly. Mrs. Mahalis? Mr. Acom? Yes. Mrs. Click? Yes. Mrs. Schneider? Yes. Mr. Cebulski? Yes. Exhibit D2 is a resolution to approve two then and nows. These are two orders that we had out there that we got the bills before the purchase orders were done. One is the Tyler Technologies. This is some of the software we use in our transportation department. And the other is Pintura. This is actually a freight on part of the adaptive playground. So in both of these cases, we got bills before PO, so, and they're over $3,000, so we need the board to approve them so that I could go ahead and pay the companies. Mrs. Schneider? Mrs. Mahalis? Mr. Cebulski? Mr. Akam? Mrs. Click? And the final resolution are a bunch of different transfers. And if you remember, back in the fall, we moved money around out of the athletic camp account to individual sports. And those were the winter and the spring sports. Now we're doing all the fall sports. So these are all your different camp accounts, and you can see they have varying amounts of money from the cheerleading camp to football camp to golf, soccer, volleyball, tennis, and whatnot. So it's a matter of moving the money from the camp account to the general fund, and then the general fund then moves it to the individual sport accounts. Mrs. Click? Mr. Cebulski? Mrs. Mahalis? Mr. Akam? Mrs. Schneider? Please. Oh, thank you. Yes. Yes, thank you. Okay. Mrs. Click? Mrs. Schneider? Mrs. Mahalis? Mr. Akam? Mr. Cebulski? Mrs. Schneider? Mrs. Mahalis? Mr. Akam? Mrs. Click? Mr. Cebulski? Mrs. Schneider? Mrs. Mahalis? Mrs. Click? Mr. Cebulski? Mr. Akam? Mr. Akam? Mrs. Schneider? Mrs. Mahalis? Mrs. Click? Mr. Cebulski? Mrs. Mahalis? Mrs. Schneider? Mr. Cebulski? Mrs. Click? Mr. Akam? Mr. Acom? Mr. Cebulski? Mrs. Schneider? Mrs. Click? Mrs. Mahalis? Mr. Acom? Mrs. Schneider? Mrs. Mahalis? Mr. Cebulski? Mrs. Click? Mrs. Mahalis? Mrs. Schneider? Mr. Acom? Mrs. Click? Mr. Cebulski?
So what we did is kind of updated this so that it's more aligned a little bit more to the demands of the counseling position nowadays. Not only just the college piece, but the emphasis on the social emotional support in terms of the response to intervention, multi-tier systems of supports. Terms you've heard like RTI, MTSS, things like that were not in the old update. So this pretty much aligns to those things. And because we are constantly trying to improve in those areas, this was a great way to kind of highlight the key points or responsibilities of the position. Yeah.
Mr. Acom? Mrs. Mahalis? Mrs. Click? Mrs. Schneider? Mr. Cebulski? Mr. Acom? Mrs. Schneider? Mrs. Mahalis? Mr. Cebulski? Mrs. Click? Mrs. Schneider? Mr. Acom? Mr. Cebulski? Mrs. Click? Mrs. Mahalis?
So we had a couple heaters die at the high school in the very first edition. We call it E-Hall. That's off of there, and so those were original heaters. And so, in order to replace that for those two rooms, it was over $25,000, which is why we had to go out the bid and then coming to the board for approval for that. I know the weather's changing, but it's actually snow on the ground right now, so hopefully we can get those in as soon as possible with this approval. Yes, that's my understanding.
We need a motion. Mrs. Click? Mrs. Mahalis? Mr. Acom? Mrs. Schneider? Mr. Cebulski?
I'm happy to kind of point out in the notes that I sent to you, I'd given you the changes to this based on the discussion we had at our last executive meeting. The one piece that, or not executive, is our last special meeting. Just to point out a couple things, we got rid of the terms intramural activity because really this is all about clubs. It's more of a word vocabulary cleanup than anything that's in there. We did under B number 2. Talked about monetary support for the schools. We talked about changing that so that it included beyond what the school agrees and not to exceed 75%. So originally with the club, This piece was no monetary support, but we agreed that we wanted to support some of the clubs, especially something that is a little more expensive, so that it is at least manageable for the families. And then in number 4B, no uniforms will be provided to students by the school unless games will be scheduled. And so when that happens, we want to be sure that the kids are outfitted the way that they need to be from there. The only other things are just sort of minor changes. The last sentence, actually, in your notes, I crossed it out, and then it managed to still make it this last piece. But just to point out to you, number 3 under F, school-sponsored transportation to and from athletic contests, that actually should be crossed out because we do that for clubs anyway, like ski club, bowling club, for example. So this would not be an addition once they become a sport because we already provide it for clubs. So really, that should have been crossed out prior. And then the last piece is that it is currently as written under 3 years, or at 3 years, because that was the original piece and that was the discussion for tonight. We do not have any, like if the kid, for example, every once in a while we have ultimate frisbee. If the kids want to play after school, sort of like an intramural, it's very unofficial. A teacher might pick it up just as a supervisor, but we do not have official intramural piece, which is why we kind of cut out the intramural activity on the piece. So club would be the first official step towards, that going to a sport from there. And just for clarification, we don't have a current policy, so the board could choose, 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, whatever the board decides from there. If this gets implemented, then the policy becomes 3 years, right? That's what I mean, yes. Policy, yeah. Last year. Yes, yeah, so open fields is sort of like informal, kind of like you said, like the intramural piece, but it's just open fields. Wasn't really consistent, but had the opportunity. Following it.
Yeah. Mrs. Mahalis? Mrs. Schneider? Mr. Acom? Mrs. Click? Mr. Cebulski?
So in relation to lacrosse, then the board would revisit maybe at the end of the season to talk about, 1 year, 2 years, that sort of thing. Is that the best thing to do? Correct. There's 11, you need 12 for a team, so they currently do not have any games, they're doing potential some scrimmages, things like that.
Correct, yep, ODE to do. Yeah, so, next month you could approve the, since it's a discussion item, you could approve the policy that would go along with that regulation to expand upon it, correct?
Mrs. Click? Mr. Acom? Mrs. Schneider? Mrs. Mahalis? Mr. Cebulski?